Om Ajnanatimidandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Dhena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Welcome back and welcome to everyone who's here for the first time. I've been away for maybe 5 weeks, 6 weeks, and coming back, I noticed that the garden looks a lot different from when I left my garden, our garden in Burlingame. And this morning, I was thinking a lot about the power of the seeds, and that how that garden has a life of its own. With a little bit of light and water and the right soil, everything, the seeds and the plants, especially with this new phenomena here in California called rain. It's been missing for a while. Everything bursts out on its own. I've seen so many times when the garden looked haggard and dry and sometimes almost dead. In fact, whole fields in California, whole hillsides can look practically dead. But when the rain comes again, the beautiful canopy of green comes back and the life abounds again in the gardens and the fields and so forth. And so over time, those who are especially attentive or who work in gardens and see that there are cycles. There are ways in which the garden comes and goes and is revived under certain circumstances. I begin to develop confidence. And in the great teachings of Rupa Goswami, who instructs about the process of bhakti yoga, in his book Upadeshamrita, there's an instruction about confidence. It comes from the Latin word confidere. Con means it gives emphasis to the word, like something extreme, and fidere means trust. So confidence, confident, confidere means extreme trust. Having confidence means to have, as Srila Prabhupada writes in one place about the word faith, unflinching trust in something sublime. And even the phenomena in this world, in the phenomenal world, things that we can observe empirically, study, have miraculous properties about them. For instance, as I was mentioning, seeds. They may look small and dry, insignificant, but with the right combination of water, air, soil, then something miraculous happens. They spring to life, and from them come more seeds, more fruits, more flowers that can regenerate themselves and so forth. So the process of spiritual awakening, according to Rupa Goswami in his Upadeshamrita, which is sort of a summary of all the principles that he teaches. There are many books written by the great masters of Bhakti Yoga. One of the most important is called the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which gives the details of the process of devotional service. But then it's condensed into a smaller book that anyone can carry around. In fact, we know one devotee, Hanumat Prishak Swami, who carries it around with him wherever he goes in a little bag around his neck and reads from it regularly. And it's one thing to read something, it's another thing to apply the principles. Actually, there are so many different instructions and ideas that come out of the teachings of the great masters, and one can read them extensively, but there's a way in which simply by taking one or two of the principles and applying them to one's own life, one can actually realize the knowledge that's there. Application is important. So in that book, that small book, condensed teachings of Bhakti Yoga, called Upadeshamrita. So Upadesh means advice, and Amrita means the nectar. Upadeshamrita means the nectar of this spiritual advice. He talks, Rupa Goswami does, about the importance of confidence, having confidence in what you're doing. So in writing the book, in writing my book recently, which I just released while I was in India last month, I had come across a quote about how gardeners should trust good seeds, put their trust in good seeds. When you have a good source and you understand you're getting good seeds, you be confident about planting them and what the result will be, and so forth. And in the practice of bhakti also, in the practice of spiritual life, spiritual advancement, when one is confident about the source of one's knowledge and therefore becomes enthusiastic to apply it regularly, such a person will advance quickly in spiritual life. And one of the wonderful results of having such confidence and moving forward in spiritual life, even if one isn't entirely sure of all the details, if one's confident about the process, then there's help from, well, we say help from within. In the Bhagavad Gita, in Sanskrit, Bhagavad means the supreme person, and Gita means song, so literally sometimes people call it the Song of God. And in this book, the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is speaking to his disciple Arjuna, and it's in a kind of an interesting environment on a battlefield. And there was a movie made about this not too long ago called The Legend of Bagger Vance. Anybody hear about that? It was a book and then also a major motion picture. Yeah, you know, none of you go to the movies. Bagger Vance was a transposition of this book, the Bhagavad Gita, in the context of golfing. There was a golfer who lost his poise, but his caddy, who was the caddy, and for those of you who don't know what golf is, caddy's the one who carries the golf clubs around and also gives advice. He's kind of like coaches a little bit for the golfer. Use this club, don't use that one. He knows the course and so forth. So he would give advice to this famous golfer, and the golfer lost his composure. And so the caddy was advising him how to move forward in his golf game and so forth. And in a similar way, in this book, Krishna is the chariot driver for Arjuna, who's a great archer and warrior, and they're entering into the battle. And the great warrior, uncharacteristically, Arjuna, loses his composure in the battle, just before the battle's to begin. And Krishna, who's his driver, begins to instruct him, to give him confidence. And one of the very powerful statements that Krishna gives him that is a universal principle for spiritual life. It's nothing sectarian. It's something that anyone can apply anywhere, any living being, or especially human beings. Because generally, according to the Vedas, animals, although sacred, have not evolved their consciousness far enough to develop this kind of impetus or volition, their own volition for advancing spiritually. But when one does get some favorable circumstances in one's life, good association, good instruction, it can come from a book. It can come from somebody who's also practicing spiritual life. Then, if one simply develops this kind of confidence that, yes, there is a valid process, although I may be inadequately equipped at the time being. I may not have everything that I need, or I'm not qualified for it, and there's a gap between me and the goal. Generally, that's the case when one begins any process. There's a gap. And in the case of spiritual advancement, the gap may be vast. But if one has this confidence that the process itself is valid, and then embraces the process, then in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna gives this statement in the 10th chapter, the 10th verse, which he says, Tesham satata yuktanam pachatam pritipurvakam tadami buddhi yogam tam yenamam upayanti te. And that is that those who move forward on the path with confidence, they trust it. They trust the process. They trust the seeds. They trust the fact that there is some higher order, and there is a higher intelligence that's benevolent. These things are required. In fact, there's this idea that there is a supreme intelligence. This is kind of a basic item of the process of spiritual advancement. There's higher spiritual intelligence. There is a controller who's benevolent, omnipotent, omniscient, and benevolent. Those things are required. Otherwise, and in other words, as Hridayananda Maharaj likes to say, God is not a religious fanatic. And if he was all-powerful but not benevolent, then we would be in big trouble. Because then, if he was a sociopath and just like to see people suffering for the sake of it, we'd be in big trouble. So the premise is that there is a supreme, and that supreme is all-powerful and omniscient and also all-benevolent. So in those circumstances, those who are aspiring on the spiritual path simply need this confidence. If one has that confidence, Krishna says in the verse, and moves forward with this idea that Krishna will help me, he says, yes, I will help you. for those who move forward confidently on the path of devotional service, he says, with faith, with trust and love, then I give the intelligence. Dadami buddhi yogam tam. So buddhi means intelligence. So he said, I provide the intelligence, how to move forward on the spiritual path from within your own heart. Dadami buddhi yogam tam. Enamam upayanti te. And so I'm going to read the purport to that verse in the 10th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, because it's so inherently encouraging that from any position, if one is simply sincere and confidently moves forward on the path, that one will get help and all intelligence from within the heart. So I'll say and you can repeat. Tesham satata yuktanam vajatam priti purvakam janami buddhi yogam tam yenamam upayanti te. Tesham, unto them. Satata yuktanam, always engaged. Bhajatam, in rendering devotional service. Priti purvakam, in loving ecstasy. Dadami, I give. Buddhi yogam, real intelligence. Tam, that. Yena, by which. Mam, unto me. Upayanti, come. Te, they. Translation, to those who are constantly devoted to serving me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. Let's say together. To those who are constantly devoted to serving me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. Srila Prabhupada's purport. In this verse, the word buddhi yogam is very significant. We may remember that in the second chapter, the Lord instructing Arjuna said that he had spoken to him of many things and that he would instruct him in the way of buddhi yoga. Now, buddhi yoga is explained. Buddhi yoga itself is action in Krishna consciousness. That is the highest intelligence. Buddhi means intelligence, and yoga means mystic activities or mystic elevation. When one tries to go back home, back to Godhead, and takes fully to Krishna consciousness in devotional service, his action is called buddhi yoga. In other words, buddhi yoga is the process by which one gets out of the entanglement of this material world. The ultimate goal of progress is Krishna. People do not know this, therefore the association of devotees and a bona fide spiritual master are important. One should know that the goal is Krishna, and when the goal is assigned, then the path is slowly but progressively traversed, and the ultimate goal is achieved. When a person knows the goal of life, but is addicted to the fruits of activities, he is acting in karma yoga. When he knows that the goal is Krishna, but he takes pleasure in mental speculations to understand Krishna, he is acting in jnana yoga. And when he knows the goal and seeks Krishna completely in Krishna consciousness and devotional service, he is acting in bhakti yoga, or buddhi yoga, which is the complete yoga. This complete yoga is the highest perfectional stage of life. A person may have a bona fide spiritual master and may be attached to a spiritual organization, but if he is still not intelligent enough to make progress, then Krishna from within gives him instructions so that he may ultimately come to him without difficulty. The qualification is that a person always engage himself in Krishna consciousness, and with love and devotion render all kinds of services. He should perform some sort of work for Krishna, and that work should be with love. If a devotee is not intelligent enough to make progress on the path of self-realization, but is sincere and devoted to the activities of devotional service, The Lord gives him a chance to make progress and ultimately attain him. And there are various ways of approaching the world. In the realm of yoga, we talk about karma, jnana, bhakti. Or Krishna talks about those in the Bhagavad Gita. Analyzing the world, or karma yoga, working in such a way that one becomes detached from the fruits of one's work. And jnana yoga, in observing the world in such a way that one can discern that there's a supreme controller. But bhakti yoga is being recommended here because there's a way in which the idea of the supreme is that the supreme is supreme, beyond our ability to describe or to know by our limited intelligence. If one can describe completely or understand through the process of empirical knowledge what is the supreme, then that's something else besides the supreme. So what does one do in such a case when something is beyond one's capability to comprehend, or something is superior? How does one approach that situation? For instance, in a circumstance when you may be going for a job interview and you're going to ask for a job, what do you do? Maybe you prepare yourself. You might look online and say, oh, you must smile like this and ask these questions, sit up straight and be respectful and so forth, make a good impression, and from that there may be a good outcome. And in a similar way, when one is approaching the supreme, as we are through the process of yoga, Krishna recommends in the Bhagavad Gita that one become submissive, sincere. And by that, sincere inquiry and submissive service, then because the supreme, and this is our premise, is benevolent, omniscient, and omnipotent, he has the ability to reveal himself. That is factually one's only hope, ultimately. Otherwise, there's no possibility of simply by force, a tour de force, to make the Supreme reveal himself. As there may be an idea in science, of course, this is a scientific process. It's simply using different tools. And there's a way in which, by submissively inquiring, the Vedas say, Tato Brahma Jignasa. This is remarkably the main purpose of the human form, according to the Shastra, that you have this ability to inquire about really big things, beyond just the normal necessities of the body, because those are not so difficult to attain. But one can actually ask a huge question, and that is, what is the greatest? What is the supreme? And built into that sincere inquiry is a process. There is an answer. And that is the process of bhakti, which is called grace. To connect the gap, the huge gap between myself and the unknown, the supreme. There's this word, this concept of grace, which is being expressed in this verse. that if you sincerely inquire and you're confident in the source and you ask the question, then the answer will naturally come. How does it come? Dadami buddhi yogam tam, that I give intelligence from within. And in the next verse, there's a metaphor Krishna gives that he lights up a lamp in your heart. It's like illumination through lighting a lamp. Tesham ivanukampartam aham ajnana jamtamaha. Nashayam ya babhavasto jnana deepena bhashvata. A deep means a lamp. So he says, if you get into this spirit of bhakti, that there is a supreme that's benevolent, that's omniscient, omnipotent, and you sincerely inquire, you just try to follow what others have given before, the teachers have given, and try to follow the authorized process which has been presented. Then, naturally, there will be answers. And intelligence will come from within the heart, and it'll be as if there's an illumination by a lamp that's being lit within your heart to show the way. You'll get light. So this is one of the great secrets of bhakti, is that one has to submissively inquire and be confident about the process of devotional service. I'm smiling because oftentimes, as Prabhupada has pointed out in his lectures, there's a way in which I might endeavor for something more complicated because this seems too simple. And unless there's some more detailed process, pressing one's nose, or, I mean, nothing against pressing one's nose, pranayama is a good thing, but there may be an idea that I have to complicate things more. It has to be more detailed than this, than simply to be sincere and to inquire sincerely in order to find something, find some profound knowledge. But here, Krishna's giving this idea that if you simply are sincere and you inquire and you try, then he'll help from within. And what does that mean to be sincere? Practically an unmotivated person, I mean, someone who approaches you for something, if they have a sincere intention in inquiring from you, might you not be more inclined to reveal to them the secrets of your life? I mean, there's different ways that people might approach us for different reasons. And we're all sentient beings, which means we're sensitive. I mean, you might notice that when people ask things from you for maybe sometimes obviously motivated reasons, you might be hesitant to hand over the knowledge that you have. Do you find that to be true? I'm trying to think of a circumstance where somebody might have maybe even a sinister reason for asking you for some information. I mean, you might get, I notice nowadays there's a way in which people try to protect themselves from giving out information because, I mean, information floats around these days in so many different ways, so you sort of have to protect the information that you have, because if people get a hold of it for the wrong reason, they might usurp your identity. And even I've seen that for random traffic stops nowadays, there are all kinds of techniques that people teach to tell the police officer as little as possible, or nothing at all. I mean, there are a lot of inquiries in life. people make inquiries, and there's a lot of information that we may have, but we may not give it very readily according to the circumstance. And so there's a similar situation when approaching Krishna, and that is, if my intention is sincere. For instance, I may approach somebody for knowledge because I would like the knowledge so that I can take over their position. Is that possible? Yes? What's that? You're speaking from the front row, from the corporate world. I can tell from the way you're smiling. What have you to say about that, Shraddha?
I'm saying in the corporate world, it's very much possible. People are very scared. Information is power. They don't like to share it at all.
Yeah, there may be a competitiveness in the marketplace. People don't like to share what they're writing, or because somebody else might then claim ownership of that knowledge. I mean, there are various circumstances when it comes to sharing the information one has, in which one may be more forthcoming, depending on the circumstances. If somebody approaches you who loves you and is trying to serve you, and you trust them, and then that word confidere, confident, means supreme trust, confident. Fidere means trust, and con is an emphasizer. So it means if you have confidence that somebody is approaching you for service, they want to hear from you some information so they can do more to help you, for instance. You might be more forthcoming in giving the information that you have, right? So this comes into this verse, Tesham satata yuktanam bhajitam priti. Priti means with love. If you're approaching the Supreme with some motivation, then the knowledge you get may be a little bit limited. But if it's out of love, priti, affection, sincerity, then unrestrictedly that knowledge, buddhi, will come into your heart, how to advance in devotional service. So this is the simple setup for the process of advancing in any spiritual path. It's a universal principle that if one sincerely, without motivation, inquires about the Supreme, then there's a response that comes from within. And it may be manifest also from without in one's life. One may then begin to see circumstances in one's life that are helpful to moving forward in spiritual life. And therefore, this verse can become a center point for anyone's practice in devotional service, to sincerely inquire. I thought about recently this process of prayer, which is can be as a method of inquiry. Anybody here try that? Process of prayer? Yes or yes? Yes. Okay. So I noticed recently when I was in India that there was two people talking, and another came over who wanted to ask a question and needed to interrupt the conversation. Have you ever seen such a situation? Happens a lot. And the interrupter came and approached these two people involved in the conversation like this. It's kind of like, excuse me. And then I noticed how powerful this is a mudra, actually. Put your hands like that. Try it for a second. when you go to somebody like this, go to your spouse or a friend, say, give me the car keys. And I started to imagine how this mudra it's kind of like a wedge. And at least in the process of interrupting conversation, it really did kind of wedge between the two and open things up, and they had to sort of suspend their conversation and look at the person and say, yes, how can we help you? This is like that. And I was thinking how that's a way a way to wedge your way in. And spiritual life is much like that also. That how are you going to get how are you going to find a way onto the path of spiritual life? It can't be done simply, as I said, by trying to understand the Supreme with one's intelligence. But if one wedges oneself in through a submissive attitude, and that's what this represents, some kind of submission. People use it all the time now. I notice that public speakers, comedians, they'll come on stage and like, okay, thank you. And it opens people's hearts a little bit if you go like this to somebody. If you ever get pulled over for a ticket, you can try. Actually, I've been pulled over twice, coming from Burlingame to the temple, because both times I was in a hurry, and both times it was coming from Mangalartik, and it was at 4 in the morning. And they thought that I must be a drunk driver, because generally I think it was a Sunday morning after Saturday night, there's a lot of people just driving home around that time at 4 a.m. And both times he asked me, what's the big hurry? And I said, I'm late for a prayer meeting, which was true. And he said, all right, go ahead. Not to take advantage of that. But the fact was that there's this kind of opening in this world when one is sincerely trying to do something good. And this is that sign. And then if one offers some prayer, and I'm talking about a sincere inquiry from one's heart, a submission, a way in which one presents oneself as helpless even. This can enter into prayer. And I think of the story in the Srimad Bhagavatam of Gajendra. The Bhagavatam shows from all different angles that the qualification for advancing in spiritual life has nothing to do with one's intelligence. And the story of Gajendra, who is an elephant, who in his past life was a king, but who ended up as an elephant in his next life, and then was put into a very dire circumstance, which is he went to bathe in a huge lake and was attacked by a crocodile who grabbed onto his leg and wouldn't let go. These kinds of things come up in this world all the time. When one's least expecting it, the crocodile grabs onto one's leg. And what did he do? What was his ultimate response? Well, I say ultimate because he tried fighting for a while, for quite some time, and was unsuccessful. And what is the ultimate resort then? Like this. And that's what he did. He just started praying. And at first, his prayers were nondescript because, I don't know how articulate you can be as an elephant. But he had some intelligence. It came from within his heart because he was sincere. And he tried. He tried with all his might. And because he tried sincerely, his prayer was answered. And there's a description of how Lord Narayan came and saved him. So there are many instances in the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the great bhakti scripture teaching about the path to pure devotional service, this completely sincere approach to God, to the Supreme, which is non-sectarian, which simply involves rejecting all religious activities that are materially motivated and depending completely on one's sincerity. And from that position, whether one's an animal or in any other circumstance of life, if one sincerely tries, then the Supreme will reveal the process, the way to move forward in spiritual life. So those are a couple thoughts to begin with, and we'll just take a few reflections. Anything that you heard so far from my reading or from my comments that's stuck in your mind that you're taking with you? We also welcome everyone who joined us online tonight. Please say Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
I like the point that you mentioned that we have ability to inquire the higher thing, higher spiritual intelligence, and sincerely inquiring it, the Krishna within guides us.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. And not only do we have the ability, but the Bhakti scriptures also say that the human life is primarily for that purpose. In fact, in the first canto, second chapter of the Bhagavatam, Kamasa nendriya pritir labo jiveti avata jivasya tattva jignasa nartoyas cheha karma bihi, says specifically that the human life is not meant for trying to adjust oneself in this material world so that one can be happy materially, because that's not altogether possible, first of all. Because no matter how hard you try to adjust your situation, it will readjust itself according to what you deserve, according to the law of karma. Has anybody found that in their own life? Otherwise, everyone would be perfectly situated, logically. Rather, and it's a relief to hear, the verse says, the purpose of life is to inquire about the Supreme. That seems a little bit benign. I mean, that's all I'm supposed to do? And the verse says, yes, you should live. And also it says, you should live, or put it like this, you should eat to live and not live to eat. That's the difference. And you can eat, and it says you should live a balanced and healthy life, a life of self-preservation. But the reason is because in the human form you have the power to inquire. And that's your main duty. Doesn't that give you a new lease on life? That, yeah, my only duty is to inquire about the Supreme. And that's why I work, is simply to maintain my environment in which I can foster that inquiring spirit, and I can actually actively inquire in many different ways. Because the answer is readily available. The answers are all available to those who sincerely inquire. Thank you. Yes.
Haribol Prabhuji, thank you. So one thing struck in my mind was from the purport which said that he should perform some sort of work for Krishna, and that work should be with love. So yeah, it is not simply something sentimental, but ultimately Bhakti Yoga is working for Krishna.
Yes. And I was talking to one of the guests on the way in about this idea of cooking with love. Jessica, right? Yeah, had read the book, The Higher Tastes, about the idea of cooking in higher consciousness. And what is the higher consciousness? Love. I mean, there is no higher consciousness than love, according to the Bhakti Shastras. The Bhakti scriptures say that we are sentient, and there are many different emotions, but the highest emotion is love. Within love, there's a natural knowing within love. And as far as yoga is concerned, and the goal, for instance, in Ashtanga Yoga, is to be able to fix the mind on one point for a sustained period of time. Not so easy, is it? I saw a bumper sticker not too long ago that said, "Seek constant distraction." And I was thinking, I don't have to seek it out. It's already upon me. And this kind of focus that the yoga systems talk about is elusive. Actually, until you try to actually focus your mind, you may notice that you may think, oh, that's not a big deal. But even in the process of Ashtanga Yoga and meditation, to be able to fix the mind on one point for 7 seconds is considered one of the very high stages of meditation, because the mind is so fickle. But when one has this sense of love, when you love somebody, it doesn't matter where you are or what circumstance, your mind will be glued to that person constantly. You'll always be thinking. For instance, if someone has a beloved child, he or she may go off to a foreign country, and even then, one's thinking of the child. One's at work, one's thinking of the child. One's driving home, one's thinking of the child, so forth. That when there's a sense of love, then the mind becomes ultimately fixed. This is why bhakti, which is the yoga of love, developing this emotion that you're talking about, that the verse is talking about, that you're recalling, a sense of love is there in one's work. And therefore we say that bhakti is the path of dedication. There are ways in which there are different approaches to yoga. Sometimes different approaches to the way one works with one's environment. Described in a practical way sometimes. Srila Prabhupada gave this example, that if you see somebody drop a $100 bill on the ground, maybe you're standing in line at, say, Whole Foods, and somebody drops a $100 bill. That's pretty likely at Whole Foods somebody would drop a $100 bill. So they drop a $100 bill on the ground, and what are your choices? Now, I've seen video, undercover videos of these things happening. And sometimes people will bait people, and they'll have it on film, right? And then people will just like grab it like, hey, I'll keep that. That's possible, isn't it? That might happen. Nobody here, but I mean, it's possible that somebody might see it and think, well, I'll take advantage of the situation, I'll just keep it. Right? Possible, isn't it? So that's one alternative. What are a couple more alternatives? There's the other alternative. You may just do nothing. Like I've seen in the airport, walking down one of the hallways, and somebody dropped a ticket. And 3 people said, "Ah, you dropped your ticket." Everyone was concerned. They wanted to have a ticket back. But somebody else might just think, it's their problem, leave it. I mean, that's possible, isn't it? Someone might just not do anything, not feel any responsibility. And the third? Yeah, the Japan cab driver. If you lose a bag of money in Japan in a cab, they'll come looking for you to give it back. That's kind of amazing. And so that's a third alternative. Somebody drops a $100 bill, and you tap them on the shoulder and say, "You just dropped this." And what do they say? Thank you. And how do you feel? Happy. Yeah. And if you kept it, how do you feel? Seriously, how would you feel? Yeah, I had this experience where I had an office chair, and it needed new arms because I wore them out. And I went down to the office place and I said, "Can you replace these?" And And he did. He said, well, try these, and if they work, you come back and pay me. And so I put them on my chair, and they worked, and then I had to go out of the country for about a month. And they came back, and then I drove back to the store, and I gave him the money. And when he saw me come in, I saw a level of appreciation. Of course, the time period it took to come back maybe gave him pause, and he might have thought, there goes another one. But when I gave it to him and he appreciated it, and I was walking out of the store, I remember how palpable it was. There was a visceral experience I had that I was happy. I felt like a bigger person. And I thought, how did that happen? It was only $25. But if I had kept the $25, I would have, for the rest of my life, felt horrible. There would have been a kind of a seed of unrest in my heart every time I sat in that chair and put my arms on the armrest. I thought, you jerk, you know. But it only cost me $25 to go back and meet the person who had extended himself to me and give him his due, to actually feel happy. And then there's something that I built on that. I thought the things in this world, we actually live in a bi-dimensional universe, as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita. There's spirit and there's matter. And actually, contrary to common reasoning, things like compassion, which you cannot empirically observe necessarily or describe with a formula. It cannot be circumscribed. As in physics, often there's this, or there has been traditionally, it's being reconsidered, this idea that there's one equation that can describe everything in the whole universe, including consciousness, which has never been done, and therefore they sort of put it aside. But there are these intangibles that have to do with compassion, love, honor. How can you describe honor in a mathematical equation? It's not possible, but it's just as tangible, or I could say more tangible, more important than the material side. Otherwise, why did I become so fulfilled just by going back and giving the person his due and doing the right thing? So these alternatives are always there. There's a way in which I can try to adjust my situation in this material world and try to keep everything myself. This is the path of exploitation, sometimes known as materialism, or maybe even hedonism. There is a philosophy like that try to get as much as you can. There are various economic systems based on that, in which just try to get as much as you can. And then there's also the path of renunciation. And of course, we're comparing this path of materialism to picking up the $100 bill and keeping it. And there will always be a feeling of unrest. And then the other idea is just don't interact with the world at all. Just leave it alone. Don't consider yourself part of it. Don't consider yourself responsible for anything. And leave the $100 bill. And then how will you feel? Incomplete. But then the path of dedication is represented by tapping the person on the shoulder and giving it back and saying, here, this is yours. You lost it, take it back. And then there's a swelling of this feeling of completeness from doing the right thing. And this is compared to the path of dedication, the path of love. So using everything that we have for this purpose of service, higher service. And in that service, there's a descent of grace, which closes the gap between us and the Supreme. So that idea of doing one's work with love is altogether possible through the process of bhakti yoga. There were a couple more hands. My answer was so long that you probably forgot what you were thinking.
Almost. But I was just saying how in the prayer of Gajendra, as you said, there is no failure in Krishna consciousness, because sometimes we pray and then people just after some time they say that, oh, I tried this path and it didn't work, and they'll go try out somewhere. But just a little bit of introspection, it's just proves that there is no better result that we can get from any other process that's there than by following this process of Krishna consciousness given by Gaura and Nitai, where you have to like really be pure, like it should be like topmost, like pure diamond. So like that we have to, it gives hope that even if you fail, if you really keep up with your prayer, the final thing that you get is the topmost. So that shows in Gajendra's prayers, how you said like how he did total surrender. Then Krishna came and...
You said doing the right thing? Did you mention that?
Being hopeful.
Being hopeful.
Like that shows in Gajendra's prayers, he didn't give up. He just surrendered until he stayed in the path until the end, and then he got the result.
Yeah. I brought up maybe yesterday in the class about integrity. And this word integrity comes, the word integer is familiar to everybody, which means something whole. It means a whole. It's not a fraction, it's a whole number. And so, integrity means that one feels a wholeness. And how does one get that? By consistently doing the right thing. I was considering how there are, and it's related to the verse we talked about today, there's a witness within the heart. This is the statement of Krishna later on in the Bhagavad Gita also, that Ishvara sarva bhutanam hrideshara junatistiti. In the Sanskrit he says that I am that witness. I'm the one who's watching and seeing everything that you do. And so an awareness that whatever I'm doing is being observed by the Supreme from within the heart. And responding to that by the way in which one lives one's life and does the right thing consistently, it begins to develop this sense of integrity, which is also an important aspect of spiritual life. One begins to feel whole by service, whole by doing the right thing, by acting according to the prescribed process. And this gives more confidence. Thank you. Yes.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. The point that I liked is you were mentioning with Bhagavad Gita 10.10, and it is such a beautiful shloka, because in Chad we were doing chapter 10 for last whole month, and the point I stuck to my mind is you were mentioning that we are sentient beings, and we are human beings very sensitive, and if somebody offers a gift or kind words, actually we can know, it is coming from their heart or not, or it's just formality. And Krishna is supreme actually, and in that particular verse it is said, you were explaining how if one is sincerely following the path, then there will be a response. And Krishna says the Dami Buddhi Yogam, so Krishna will respond from within. So this is a very hopeful. This gives a hope. If one follows the path, then there will be a response from within, and Lord helps. I liked that point.
Yeah, and it reminded me when you said that frequently in the Bhakti scriptures, saints advise that we beg. Because when you beg for something, there's a little bit extra energy that you generate. I mean, begging is a pretty active profession, isn't it? pretty active profession. There's, I mean, it's kind of obvious, but if someone doesn't ask, oftentimes they don't get. But when people ask, they get. And if you beg, I don't know, can you look up the word beg and see what it says? When you actually are very proactive in asking. I mean, let's see what the definition of beg is. Which is what Bhaktivinoda Thakur says. It is prayers that one should beg to be able to chant the names of God, not take it for granted. What does it mean?
To ask for as a gift, as charity, or as a favor.
To ask for as a gift, charity, or favor.
To ask someone to give or do something. Implore.
To ask someone to
give or do something.
Give or do something.
To take for granted without basis or justification.
To take for granted without basis or justification. That's possible also. Like a lot of prayers start with, I don't deserve anything. Because that's sort of a basis of, that's a premise of many of the Vaishnava prayers. I'm the lowest person in the universe. In fact, actually, this is one of the points that came up when we were just recently in Jagannath Puri. The Gaur Govinda Maharaj had brought up this point about how your main qualification is that you're disqualified. The more disqualification you have, the more qualified you are to beg. I mean, with beggars, if you see somebody wearing a Rolex, you're going, I'm not giving him $5 because he looks like he already has a watch there. But if a person is in dire need, then you might, really feel compelled. Anything else?
Then as a verb, to ask alms or charity, live by asking for alms. And then to ask humbly or earnestly.
To ask earnestly.
Yes, and there was a very different meaning as well. To fail or refuse to come to grips with, or avoid or evade. For example, a report that consistently begs the whole problem.
I see. From German?
Just looking at the origin. Before 900, Middle English began by assimilation from Old English, bedikan, which means to beg. Yeah.
This is another simple concept of how to advance in spiritual life, is to beg. And there was a song, a popular song, I think in the 1980s, that had the refrain in it that I'm not too proud to beg. That was the refrain that the song kept coming back to. Not too proud to beg. So that we should have that sense of begging, reaching out. This is part of this the genre of this verse of Tesham Satata Yuktanam Bhajatam Priti Purvakam, that I'm begging, I'm asking. Two more reflections. Okay.
I like the point of having confidence in seeds and not to seek out a too difficult process, basically.
Yeah. Occam's razor says that the simple solution is usually, amongst different choices, is the correct one. Is that right, Harimamsha? Definition of Occam's razor. Simple process. Simple is best. And the other point was that seeds, having trust in good seeds. And if you can take some time to research where you're getting the seeds from, it will give you more confidence. For instance, the book called Tattva Sandarbha was written by one of the great masters of bhakti 500 years ago. And in it he goes at great lengths to describe why you should trust in the seeds that have been given in this process, specifically given by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Not explained from the position of faith, but also from that perspective, but also from the perspective of logic. He goes at great lengths to describe how we get knowledge. What is the epistemology of our process? How you know what you know is true. It's important to have this basic information. So in the Tattva Sandarbha, Srila Jiva Goswami describes the various ways that one can get knowledge in this world. One way is through one's direct observation. And there are obvious flaws in the process of direct observation because the senses are limited. They also have defects where we can make mistakes from things that we see. If it's ever happened to you that you mistook somebody for somebody else, or perhaps you saw in the dark a garden hose and you jumped 2 feet in the air because you thought it was a snake, which is unlikely in California, but you know, or wherever you are, the senses are not perfect, and there's ways of inference to get knowledge. And Jiva Goswami, as an example, gives this instance in which you see smoke, and you may say by inference that wherever there's smoke, there's fire. We've all heard that before, right? But you may not have the perspective to see that the fire's already gone out. There is smoke, but there's no fire. But you didn't see it, but you inferred that was true. So that could also be faulty. And then he talks about the process of hearing from a reliable eyewitness who's there, who can give a direct information about what's happening in that place. And then he talks about self-evident knowledge. And Socrates, the father of logic, also talked about how one must have an axiomatic truth to deal with. Even in geometry, you must start with a basic proof, an axiom that you're dealing with. In any science, you have to start with a basic axiom, otherwise you get infinite regress. And with the basic understanding that is self-evident, that I exist, that the world exists, and that I'm not in control of it. That's a good place to start. As I've mentioned many times, a priest I once met and had an interfaith dialogue with said at the end of our conversation, actually after many years of study in the priesthood, I can say only 2 things for sure. One is there is a God and I'm not him. And that's a good place to start from. And from there, Srila Jiva Goswami in this book, Tattva Sandarbha, elaborates why it is that one should have trust in the process given by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, as you mentioned, Gandharvika, that there is an efficacy to it. When you have that kind of trust and then you apply the process, for instance, of mantra meditation, chanting, and so forth, you can put your whole mind and heart into the process, and the effect will be much greater. The reason that the mind wanders to other places and is not attentive to the process, in meditation, for example, is that it thinks there's something else available that's of greater value. Therefore, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, Nam bina kichu nahi ko oro choda bhuvan maje. That it says, you can rest here in this chanting of the names of God because there's nothing else to be had in the 14 worlds. All else is vaporous and insubstantial. You're going to make a comment, please.
So when we were talking about following the right process and not going to the other processes, you had mentioned about the pressing the nose process, pranayam. And I was doing book distribution at my work, and I met a vice president, Italy, and I was very surprised that he had hundreds of PDFs which had the Vedas written on them with nice annotation on how to pronounce them. And he spent about half an hour, reciting them, showing me how to recite them. And then he mentioned that if you pronounce the Vedas properly, then pranayam automatically happens. So I'm just thinking, if you're on the right process of bhakti yoga and you're reading from the scriptures, the lower one will automatically happen like that.
Yeah, I noticed when we were singing the Brahma Samhita yesterday, there was a little bit of pranayama involved.
Because he also said that the Vedas emanate from the breathing of the Lord, so that's pranayama.
Yeah, nice. So, Hansapriya has another point.
Hare Krishna.
Please, yeah.
So, actually, the same point that I wanted to mention, I had a practical experience. At my work, somebody had put the plant seeds in the break room. So I thought, okay, let me just give a shot. So I got the good fertilizer from Costco, and I sprouted the tomato plants. And they really grew nicely, so I transplant outside. And they were like really high, as tall as me, but no fruits. So I said, okay, I'm a little disappointed. The plant is really nicely flourishing. It's really green, but no fruit. In the end of the season, I only got from the 4 large bushes of tomato, which is not normal, only 3 tomatoes. So I was watering, I had great fertilizer, and I was quite disappointed, but I was determined that I'm going to grow. So then I went to the Lowe's and I got the different plant, eggplant. And those were already, coming from the Barney or whatever the company, nice company. And I was watering the same way I was doing tomatoes, and actually they gave me almost 100 eggplants. And then I went to the farmer's market and I got the bell pepper plant, and it gave me a bell pepper. And I was thinking, the disciplic succession, what they give us, the process, that process has already been trusted and tested and realized and has been passed down to us. And the breadcrumb seed tomatoes, that was something I would Google it and try to follow, make my religion. So I was thinking how much important it is to get the trusted seed, even in our own spiritual life.
Nice, nice. Know your source and trust the seeds once you get them. Then you can really put your heart into watering, because it does take a lot of work to garden. And it is a little disconcerting. And unknown seeds, where did it come from? Yeah, that's part of the idea, really nicely done, of the disciplic succession, that you know the connection. Where did the seed come from? Where's this idea coming from that's coming along with the impartment of the mantra? There's something in it besides just the words. There's a conception that comes with it. And that conception has to do with the verse today, this pure devotional service. Service for service, no other reason. And from that, the greatest fruit comes. And the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the teachings of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, are all about gardening. That spiritual life is about cultivating a garden. In fact, he says, I'm a gardener, and I'm planting these seeds, and the fruits are coming, so please help me. He said, everyone else become a gardener also. Plant your own garden and distribute the fruits as much as possible. And now we're going to try, with sincerity, one of the core processes of bhakti yoga, which is meditation. Which a kind of meditation that anybody can do in any place. And it's especially powerful because it utilizes the power of sound. And according to the Vedas, sound is the source of creation of the world. And a simple example, if you want to build a skyscraper building, which I do not recommend, but if you did, let's say, it would start with sound. There's a way in which the thoughts come into your mind, the desire to build it, and then to actualize the building process, you'll have to say something. You'll mention to somebody else that we need a team to build this building, and then, well, as Navina Nirada Prabhu likes to say, the world moves by mantra. You have to say so many things, and then gradually, because of your mantras, all the materials for building the thing will come together. And whatever mantras we're making in our life will determine what kinds of things come into our life as well. So this mantra is called the Maha Mantra, and it's a purely spiritual mantra, and it's linguistically constructed in the form of a prayer. And by repeating this prayer, which has divine origins, say the Bhakti scriptures, and simply listening to the sound vibration, one will naturally be elevated to higher consciousness. And the mantra, which will appear on the Jumbotron within 30 seconds or less, or your money back from today's seminar, is pronounced like this. I'll say 2 words at a time. Please repeat. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And there's 3 words, and they are as follows. Hare means the divine female aspect of the Supreme, the feminine energy of the Supreme. And it's in the form of a prayer also. Hare means, oh, the energy of the Lord. And Krishna means that which is all attractive. Actually, Karshana means the attractor, that which pulls us closer. For instance, there are different phenomena in this world that simply attract us without us having to do anything. For instance, beauty. If maybe you see a beautiful person, it's hard to keep your eyes off that person. It's not like you have to intellectualize. You just look and say, oh, that's a beautiful person. Or somebody who's very famous. For instance, if, I don't know, who's really famous right now? I'm not going to say it. Because it'll ruin the atmosphere. But if he came in here, everyone would be looking at him going, what are you doing at a Hare Krishna temple? Thought you were running an election. And then, fame, if somebody's wealthy, so forth. There are opulences in this world that attract our attention. And Krishna means the supreme attractor, that which is so attractive that he pulls everyone closer. And then Rama means spiritual strength, supreme spiritual strength, the kind of strength that it takes to develop spiritual integrity, to do the right thing even behind closed doors, and to develop a kind of inner happiness. And when one develops this inner happiness called Rama, one doesn't actually require anything else in life. One's self-sufficient. And this, according to many philosophers, is the way to become wealthy in this world, to be self-sufficient, innerly happy. So these words have great and deep meaning, but really the purpose of the prayer is to awaken, and now imagine that it's sleeping, that sincere and pure service attitude towards the Supreme, and that awakens by saying this mantra. And that, according to the Vedas, is real happiness. Happiness is not from things, but it's from consciousness. And this mantra, the meditation on this mantra, actually improves our consciousness, clarifies, purifies the consciousness, and within that purified consciousness, one actually experiences real happiness. So we repeat the mantra in several ways. One way is called japa. Everyone say japa. Japa. So japa means to repeat a mantra just loud enough so you yourself can hear it. Just so you can say it and it can go into your ears, and that way you can hear the sound. And the way in which to meditate on the sound is to be aware of the fact that you're listening. You have to be conscious that you're actually listening. If you're conscious that you're listening to the sound, that means you're meditating on the sound. If you're saying it, and is it possible, let me ask this question, to repeat it over and over again and not be aware of the fact that you're saying it? Is it possible to read a book and actually be reading the lines on the page but not actually read them? I've done it many times. I got to the end of a paragraph thinking, I was worrying about something else. I didn't even read what was there. And I have to go back. So meditation means to bring your mind into the present moment and actually be aware of the fact that you're doing something and listen to the sound. So this is japa, meditation. That's pretty simple, right? Simple, isn't it? Yes. But easy, maybe not. It takes practice. So this is something that one can practice for spiritual life. And the other way of chanting the mantra, which we'll do in just a minute, is to sing the mantra. And this is called Sankirtan. So everyone say Sankirtan. Sankirtan. So Kirtan means to sing, and sang means together. Sam, S-A-M. So Samkirtan means to sing together. So mantra meditation is meant for your own edification, and the Sankirtan is meant to do as a group. And then you get the power of everybody else's chanting all at one time in one big bucket. And we'll try both methods, if it's all right with all of you. You're up for it? Yes. Okay, here's what we'll try first. Now, japa meditation is normally counted. You don't have to count. You can go around chanting all day long without counting. But counting helps you to maintain a practice every day. Because if you count how many times you chant the mantra, then you can do it every day in a measured way, and you can start to see that you'll develop an attraction for doing the process, and you can measure your progress in it. So here's one of the ways to count. Hold up your hand, right hand, palm of your hand. You put your thumb on the middle section of your ring finger. Is it there? Okay. What? What happened? Okay. Now that's number one. That's the number one position. Now move it down to the bottom of the ring finger. There's little segments on your finger. No one actually told you when you were born or anything, but these are for counting japa. So the second position is at the bottom of your ring finger. Third position is at the bottom of your little finger. Fourth position is at the middle of your little finger. Fifth position is at the top of your little finger. Sixth position is at the top of the ring finger. Seventh position is top of your middle finger. Eighth position is the top of your index finger. Ninth is the interim part of your index finger. And 10 is at the bottom of your index finger. It's amazing that I could articulate that, right? That we actually have terms for all these fingers and everything. Okay, so it goes like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Give it a trial run before we start. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Did you land back here? Yeah. Okay, good. So on each number, like number 1, we'll chant one full mantra. And here's one full mantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Just what's printed there. That's one full mantra. It's 32 syllables. 16 words, 32 syllables. Nice and even, okay? So once you do that, then you move to the next segment and you chant one full mantra, and you go all the way around. And what we're going to do is we're going to go for 20 mantras. Now you may say, well, that's not very many, but you have to be conscious that you're chanting. Listen to yourself chant and be aware of the fact that you're doing it, and hear the sound and be in the moment when you're chanting, okay? Now granted, you're going to do this alone, and we're going to do it as a group, so it's a little more like Sankirtan. But try to isolate and be focused on your own chanting. And the way to augment that, as we mentioned earlier, is to make it a prayer. If you're calling out, and when you chant this mantra, and that it's written in such a way that you can do that, Hare Krishna, you're making a prayer from your heart, please engage me in your service. Then it'll be even more effective. Your meditation will be more effective. Ready? Okay. Before we start, I'm going to repeat one other mantra that you can all say back to me, and then we'll start with the Hare Krishna, because this helps to clear the way to chant this mantra. It's all in the science. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhara, Shri Advaita Gadadhara, Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And by the way, what did you just do? I know, but what was it? No, but what was the experience anyway? Well, did you have any, like, feeling that you can describe when you stopped? For me, I could experience that the mantra was still in my mind. Like, the vibration is very powerful, so it still feels like I'm still chanting when I stop. It's definitely a feeling that the mantra is still there. Any other feelings? Yes. Shri Kumar, here comes the microphone.
That I was trying to connect, and then as soon as I stopped that connection.
So it was like on your cell phone when you were like, I think you just dropped the call or something. Okay, nice, you felt a connection. Okay, well, this is to be experimented with. Spiritual life has to be self-evident. It has to be experienced for oneself. As much as when you're hungry and you eat food, you have to have the experience. It can't be theoretical, it can't be from cultural momentum, you have to get it yourself. So what Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who taught this process 500 years ago, said was, everyone should find out for themselves. That don't take it on mere faith, but take it practically. And the best way to do that is to have your own self-evident experience. And the best way, the most direct way, is by chanting this mantra. So if you practice every day, and how to practice? With attention. This is the ingredient, because you can go on chanting and chanting for a long time and not have an experience. But just the very way in which you organize your environment so that you can put your attention to this, even if it's for 2 minutes, will change your life. And that's what it should do. It should give you a portal to look through that's pointing towards a higher transcendent reality that you can see for yourself. Not that you have to take on faith. You should be able to see it. So through the mantra. And now we'll try the Sankirtan. So what I have here is a special drum. Of course, any instrument will do with the chanting process. But we just happen to have this traditional Bengali instrument called a khol that is kind of like a tabla, only it has a rope around it so you can dance around if you want to. There's nothing if I decide to jump up and start dancing, nobody can stop me because I have this rope around my neck and I can hold the drum. And then we have a kartalist in the front row. Hold up your kartals. Little hand cymbals to keep time. It's just meant to keep the rhythm. And then we have a harmonious. Now this is actually a European instrument, but it was adopted in India many years ago to keep a nice melody. And we have our highly touted certified kartalist who just entered the arena also. So I'll sing the Maha Mantra, and then you please sing from your hearts, just let yourselves go. And same process as before, only you can sing out loud to your heart's content. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare. So that was Sankirtan. So we tried japa, little Sankirtan, but now we'll try the even more active form of meditation. We'll do Sankirtan plus dancing. Thank you, everybody. Hare Krishna. Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, hey, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman.